Okay, so we're halfway through the show almost, and standing by now in the Bay Area is Cielo de Vaz. Cielo, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hey, Glenn, how are you?
I'm really well, thanks. How are you coping with the COVID quarantine?
Trying not to go stir crazy, hanging in there. So, I mean, it is what it is. So,
Yeah. I'm really interested, Cielo. So for those who aren't familiar with you or your kind of journey, if you will, I mean, the very first time that I heard about you was when you were featured as part of Apple's global Shot on iPhone campaign. And that
Yeah.
was where you came on my radar, if you will. But I mean, you've really diversified beyond that. So it's been iPhone photography, but you're into vlogging and podcasting and loads of different projects. Do you want to talk us a bit through about that journey?
Yeah, I think at the very heart of everything is I'm a storyteller. So, and I use the different ways that I'm able to tell a story. So at first it started with photography. I was using like the big cameras, and then I discovered the phone, and then I wanted to tell stories in a different way. And that's how I got into vlogging and making videos. And then also just the audio format. I love podcasts. So I was like, hey, I want to also do a podcast. So I think, I love playing around with the different mediums. And I think doing a little bit of each thing influences each other. And so I don't know, I just love storytelling. Any way I can, I'll do it.
Very good. I know that you had a presentation that you wanted to share with us. Are you kind of ready to go for it?
Yeah, so I think what I wanted to share is what I do differently from a lot of people is I shoot my videos. Everything is all mobile workflow, and I get a lot of questions around, hey, like how do you do that with just your phone? So I'm gonna divulge some secrets here, and kind of go through the workflow of how I do everything on my phone.
That would be fantastic.
So yeah, let me just share my screen here. Should have done this earlier. Okay. I hope that's the right screen. All right, I know Elliot will tell me it's okay, cool. So what I am going to share today is my all mobile workflow for everyday storytelling. And actually, I do it for other things too, even for lengthier videos. So it's not just for, daily short storytelling. But before I go into it, I just want to tell this one story, which is a great example of having an all mobile workflow. So one day, my family and I, we were going home from lunch, and we decided to take a different route home. And on the route home, we saw this really cool shoe store. So my son is a sneakerhead, and he's like, oh, that's the store that has where you can buy and sell these really exclusive Jordans. I know nothing about shoes. So we went in. I was expecting it to be some lame like thrift store and whatnot. But when we got in there, I was like, holy cow, this place is amazing. And so, of course, just like everybody else, when you see something amazing, you pull out your phone. Oh my gosh, there's a turkey there. Sorry, a turkey just landed on my puppy. Anyway, and so I pull out my phone and I started filming. So I'll play this for you.
The sneaker industry is a $100 billion industry, and it's where people buy and sell exclusive, hard-to-find shoes like it's the stock market. It takes deep knowledge about a shoe to truly know its worth.
The Travis Scott's one, that's a collab, and then here's the low version.
And this store isn't just a shoe store. It's a place where sneakerheads can satisfy their obsession.
So I wanted to share that because if I didn't have an all mobile workflow, I don't think I would have been able to do that. So what happened after that was we got into the car. I wasn't driving. I was culling through my footage. I was already picking out my favorite shots. And luckily I was shooting with my iPhone 11 and I used the ultra wide a lot. And that enables me to capture really stable footage. So I had some really great shots. And then we got home, I edited my video, and then it was up on Instagram. And then, sneakerheads started commenting, and then we were kind of sharing this great experience about this store. And had I if I had a different workflow, I don't think I would have done it. I think the footage would have probably just stayed on my phone, and that would have been that. So it's really, I think for me, it's really key to have an all mobile workflow. And especially now, I've pledged to do a video a day for a year, which looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how hard this was going to be. But I'm doing it, and I think I'm 108 days in. And so after having done a video a day now for 108 days, I've learned quite a few things. So the first one is my workflow is super optimized now. The first one is I learned how to keep it light and lean. So I'll talk about my gear in a second. And then I am going to talk about my core app stack. And if you take anything away from this presentation, this is probably it. And I've played around with a ton of different apps, and I actually will prove it to you right now. I'll show you my collection, and if you can see it. So I have all of these apps that I've kind of downloaded, and I found that these apps, my core app stack, are the apps that play really well together. And then I'm going to talk about some of the shortcuts that I take, because sometimes you need shortcuts. And then finally, I know we all kind of want our posts to stand out. So I'm going to talk about some of the ways I add the wow. So let me share with you my light and lean kit. And this is for everyday storytelling. So obviously, if I'm going to shoot something more elaborate, I'll have more gear. But on an everyday basis, I'll just show it to you here. I just have this, and I call this my sparkly pouch method. That's because I keep everything in the sparkly pouch. And this is always in the same place, in the same drawer. When I take anything out, it always goes back in, so that this kit is always complete. This has been key, so that when I'm going, I don't have to look around, where's that mic? Where's this, where's that? So having everything in one place has been key. And in here are a couple of things. So one that I have is this Rode VideoMic L, and then it has the wind muff. The wind muff is key. I've screwed up audio so many times because I forgot to bring this. And it's really good. It's really important to capture really good audio. It's easy to screw that up. So a mic is always necessary. And then also I have a little tripod that I have in here. And that's it. And I keep it really simple. And this allows me to capture footage whenever I'm on the go, capture things that I didn't expect to. And then also, in addition to that, I now have this really cool case, which has been such a game changer. And this is by Joby. It's called the Standpoint, and it has a built-in tripod, it's been a game changer. I've been able to capture shots that I would have been like, I don't have a tripod. Not the case, because now I always have a tripod. So I'll sometimes use it to hold it, or, I'll prop it up. And also, since I do shoot myself a lot, it comes in handy for like propping it up. The last piece of thing I have in my kit is my Apple Watch. And this has been key, especially if you're filming yourself. We all know that you're supposed to film with a back lens. And so when you do that, you're like, I don't know how to keep myself in frame. Well, there's a remote app on the watch that allows you to see yourself from what your lens is seeing. And it also acts as a remote. So that is my basic kit, but you can see behind me, depending on what it is I need to shoot, I will bring a little bit more gear, but generally light and lean, that's the way to go. So then here's the key part, my core app stack. Like I showed you, I tried everything under the sun. I don't know how much money I've spent on all of these apps. These are the ones that play really well together. And no, I'm not sponsored by any of these apps at all, by the way. So the first one is Filmic Pro. And I know there was a question earlier about, do you use the stock camera app versus Filmic Pro? And I find most of the time I am actually using Filmic Pro, even for everyday storytelling, for a couple of reasons. One is that it allows me to monitor my audio. The stock camera app doesn't allow me to do that. Two, it allows me to use the next app, which I'm about to talk about. And then it also lets me do things like lock my focus and lock my exposure. So then the next app is the Filmic Remote app. So that's the app that I use on my watch. And yes, the stock camera does have, the watch does work with the stock camera, but it's glitchy. And I found that the Filmic Remote app works really well with the Filmic Pro app. So it's consistent. So that's kind of one of the big reasons as well that I use Filmic Pro. Okay, the next one is files. So this one, most people don't know about. So when I teach at Stanford and I tell my students that, okay, then now let's go into this app. They're like, I don't think I have this app. And I'm like, no, yeah, you do. You just don't know about it. No one knows about this app. But this app is really key and has been the most helpful in terms of allowing me to have this mobile workflow because it connects Filmic Pro with LumaFusion and some of the other apps that I use. And then I'm going to do a demo after this so you can see how it all comes together. And then the next app is LumaFusion. I have tried every single editing app, and LumaFusion is the only one that really allows me to do fairly advanced things. And I think if it weren't for LumaFusion, I don't think I would be able to have an all mobile workflow. And then lastly, Dropbox. So Dropbox is my cloud storage of choice. As you might probably guess, having to shoot a video a day really fills up your phone super quickly. Even though I have 512 gigabytes, but being able to offload things to Dropbox allows me to manage my storage. So now I'm going to do a demo of how this whole workflow comes together. So we're going to start with Filmic Pro here. So this is the Filmic Pro app for those that aren't familiar. And let's just pretend that I already shot some footage. And so now I'm going to get that footage and I'm going to import it into LumaFusion. So there I clicked on the media tray and now I'm going to export this piece of footage. So I'm going to tap on it and then I'm going to click export there. And then that brings up the share modal. And then I'm going to click on open in LumaFusion. So that was really easy. I didn't have to go to Photos app or anything like that. I just kind of go straight into LumaFusion. And here's that piece of footage. So then you can play around with that footage. You can trim it before you drop it into your timeline. And I found that LumaFusion is the only editing app that lets you do this. So when you use apps like Rush, I forget other apps, they make you import the whole video. So if you have an 8-minute video, you have to put the whole thing in and trim it later. So that's really nice. So there I've dropped it into the timeline. And now the last thing, so before adding music was a little bit of a pain. And that was another thing that was kind of keeping me from having an all mobile workflow. But with iOS 13 now, in Safari, you can actually download your files. So now I'm in Safari. I'm on Artlist, which is one of my favorite stock music sites. And here I've picked a song and I'm going to download the MP3. So I'm going to click MP3 here and then click download link file. And then that's going to download that MP3. So you can see that it's downloading there. Once that finishes downloading, what that does is it actually downloads it to the Files app. So that's why the Files app is really important. So now that it's there, I have to bring it into LumaFusion. So we're going back to LumaFusion and I'm going to tap the import button here and we're going to go to the Files app and select that song that we just downloaded. And then once you download it, it's here in LumaFusion. So it's the song Take the Road. And then you can treat it like any other piece of music. So in this case, I am going to select it and then trim it and then drop it into the timeline like so. And then that's it. So see how simple that was? I didn't have to download anything, go to another device. And then from here, let's pretend that I'm done editing. My video is amazing, and now I want to export it. So I clicked on that export button there, and I'm going to export the movie. And then I'm going to select it to go to Photos. And then this brings up the export settings. So here I'm just going to save it for 1080. And then you can also mess around with quality. And then you just hit export. So as you can see, I just ran through that super quickly, but that is really how easy it is. You don't have to go anywhere, download anything, and you can really just do it on your phone. The last thing I want to talk about is the archiving piece. So from here, LumaFusion allows you to archive your whole project. So this is one of the things I love because I do get attached to my projects, and sometimes I do want to kind of edit the video and then kind of publish it somewhere else. And so this allows me to offload the whole project. So I'll show you in a second. So here, there's option to export the whole LumaFusion project package. And so here I'm going to select that and then choose Dropbox for my archiving place. And then here you can select full original media. And this is key because it allows you, so let's say you have a 1-minute video, but you only use 2 seconds of it. If you select this, what it's going to do is include the whole 1-minute video so that later when you decide to edit, you have the whole minute to play around with. And that's been really, really important for me. And I mean, I've used other editing apps and I haven't been able to replicate this feature. And this is really awesome. So then I archive it and then I'll just show you like what I do there. And then after I've archived it, I delete it. And that's how I'm able to manage the storage on my phone. So that is my general workflow, but I do get lazy. Who doesn't? Or sometimes I've had one too many mimosas. So sometimes I do take shortcuts. And there are a lot of apps out there that let you take shortcuts. I don't have time to talk about all of them, but there are 2 that are my favorites right now that recently came out. So the first one is, I think they're calling it Retro. It's By Moment. And this is a cool app because it allows you to film and sort of edit using just this app with a cool vintage filter. So if you want some, really funky, like with lots of filters and anyway, vintage feel to it, then this is the app to use. So sometimes I'll just kind of bust it out and I'll shoot a few clips here and there, and then you can export it and it's good. The only thing is it only lets you shoot for 1 minute. So that's really short. And then also you can't add music to it. So what I often do when I use this app is I still import the finished video from here and I will import it into LumaFusion, add the song, and then I publish it. But it is still a little bit of a shortcut. And then the other app, and I think Henny mentioned this, is DoubleTake. So I have been waiting for this app for the longest time. What DoubleTake does is it allows you to pick 2 of your lenses and shoot from it once. That makes sense. So in my example here, I have the back camera using the wide camera, and I have the selfie camera recording at the same time. And in this case, I shot it and I think I selected to save it as 2 separate pieces of footage. So then when you're editing, so you only shoot that once and you have 2 things. And so when you're finally editing, you have 2 shots to kind of play around with and go, back and forth. Cutting from one to the other. So that has been really, really awesome. So I filmed our podcast, a few sessions of our podcasts using this. And this is kind of sat in between us. And that's all we needed. And it's been pretty awesome. So that's that for my shortcut. So the next thing, so let me go next slide, is ways to add a little bit of wow to your videos when you do post them. So this is probably mainly for Instagram, although you can't do this for YouTube, but this works well for short form videos. So the first one that I love to use is Storylux. So let me play this so you kind of see a little bit of the interface. And this allows you to lay out your story in such a way where it's a little bit more interesting. So they have different templates. And in this particular one, I show, the photo that I took, and then I show the story behind me trying to get this photo. So this photo has been on my bucket list forever. And so I finally took the photo, and then I kind of shared the story along with it. Similarly, there's also this other app called Visco Montage, and they just came out with this app or this feature. And what this does is it's similar to Storylux, but it's a lot more freeform, where it allows you to lay out your videos and kind of create a collage like I have here. So I'll just play it really quickly. So This is a boring video of me in my pajamas working on my laptop, but it's less boring because there's 3 of me on there and one's upside down. No, I mean, I think it just adds a little bit of visual interest, and it just kind of makes your videos stand out, especially Instagram. Everyone's just kind of scrolling, and oh, this looks different. A little bit of a scroll stopper. So that's kind of some of the apps that I use. So a lot of people ask me, but why though? Like, why, when you have, cameras and you have, how to use Premiere Pro, you have a MacBook, why do I just do this all on my phone? So I think storytelling for me is really important. And I think people underestimate the power of sharing their story. And I'm constantly surprised at the reaction of the stories that I do share. So here's one of them. And by me just doing it on my phone, it really kind of gets all of the obstacles out of the way, and I just get out of my own head. I'm not like freaking out about what cool transition to add in, like it just keeps it simple. And I think that's why I do it. And especially if I have to do it every day, it's a lot easier to keep it all on my phone. And then the second thing is, I really want to show people that they can't just do it with their phones, because not everybody has the money to buy all this gear. Not everyone can subscribe to, I think Premiere Pro is pretty expensive every month. So I just want to show that it is possible. And I also teach this at Stanford. So I have a class called iPhone Filmmaking there. And at Stanford, one of my students now, so she is doing a documentary about her grandmother, and she's doing it all on her phone. And I think otherwise, if she didn't learn this, I don't think she would have done it. And so that's why I do it. I just want to kind of show people it's possible and let me be the example. And I think you're surprised at the positive reaction you get when you do finally share your story. Yeah, so that
is absolutely phenomenal, Cielo. I mean, God, you crammed so much into 20 minutes. That's insane.
I know, because I try not to speak so fast.
Well, I'm Irish, so I can't help it. But I mean, I think you did a fantastic job. I have a few questions, and then because there's a huge stream of questions coming in through that, and loads of them are very, very technical, specific to things you've showed. So we'll recommend people reach out to you afterwards as well. But I'm just interested, because you talked about the idea of shooting with a DSLR or mirrorless camera like behind you versus shooting with the phone. Do you think people look at you differently? I mean, Justine talked about this at the start of this session, but this idea how funny people looked at her initially when she was, talking to a DSLR, or Jenna said people offer to take the picture for you. Do you think people are more accepting?
They do that. That's so funny they brought that up. It's so true. Yeah, and I think I have vlogged with my my cameras back here, and you're noticed more. And I'm a little bit self-conscious and shy, so I actually, just for being discreet, I prefer to shoot with my phone. But sometimes you do want to. There are advantages for that. So I've done both, but I really like shooting with just my phone.
Great. Okay. Listen, I won't hog the time. I'll jump out and get some of the questions done. So, Greg McMillan, hi, Cielo. How much prep work or pre-planning do you do before you shoot?
It depends on what I'm shooting. And if it's something that is bigger, or if I'm shooting for a client, for example, then I will do the full pre-production. I will have an outline. I'll even do my chicken scratches of a storyboard. But generally, so for my vlogs, I have a YouTube channel, iPhone Filmmaking. I will always have an outline, and I have a formula that I typically follow so that when I am finally shooting, I'm just executing what my plan was. So I kind of have a very simple pre-production process.
Do you storyboard, or is it just you write key points that you want to hit?
I will sometimes storyboard. So I use this app called Notability on the iPad, and I have the Apple Pencil, and I will kind of just, especially if I'm shooting with somebody, it helps so they know the angle and what shot, and like how close, so that everyone's kind of on the same page. So I will storyboard for that. But if it's just me, I already know what the idea is. All I need is just kind of reminders of what the shot's going to be.
Very good. Okay, great. Okay, another question. Jake Fuller, Cielo, do you use an iPad keyboard or other external device? And if so, how does it speed up your workflow?
Yeah, so when I do, like I said, lately I seriously have just been editing on my iPhone, and I don't use the iPad keyboard for that. But I do like to use the iPad with LumaFusion. So I have the 10 here, and it speeds it up. So one key thing is in Premiere Pro, you can kind of listen to things at double time, and so you can do that using the keyboard on the iPad with LumaFusion. So I think that's one of the big things. And then shortcuts. So that's been helpful. That's one of the main reasons why I would use the iPad for editing.
Okay, fantastic. Great advice. Another question, Andrew Fielding. What is the best way to get my files from my phone to my iPad? Meaning if I start editing on my phone and want to finish on my iPad.
Yeah, so what do you call it? AirDrop. AirDrop works well, or it depends on which iPad you have, I guess. There is a I think there's a Lightning, I forgot the name of it. There's a SanDisk that you can, right, if you remember the name, Glenn, I don't remember. But you can, there's an app.
Sorry. There's a SanDisk iXpand. One of the I think it was Cassia showed it earlier. There's also the Lightning to USB cable. I think you can connect two iOS devices back to back and transfer that way. They'll recognize each other. So there's a few different options in that, right?
Yeah.
What do you use AirDrop?
Yeah, but it depends on if you want to kind of maintain the quality. I'm told don't use AirDrop. But for me, I'm mostly publishing on social media. YouTube 1080 is probably the biggest thing. A little quality loss is okay.
Interesting. Okay, very good. Next question, Clement Lai. Is there anything too long in the editing app? Animated titles, for instance, or etc.?
Yeah, I didn't mention this. This is one of my shortcuts. So I use KineMaster to animate some of my text. It's easier in KineMaster. So usually if I need to add text and animate it and add confetti even, I will do my main editing in LumaFusion. I'll import it into KineMaster. I'll type in my text and then do the cool popping in and out. And so I usually don't do the text in LumaFusion. So that's kind of one of my shortcuts.
Okay, isn't it? Well, I mean, it's worth saying that one of the discussion points here was, is LumaFusion available on Android? And right now, it's certainly not anyway. So KineMaster is very, very popular. But the Android audience, right? Do you use keyframes in LumaFusion? Like the opening animation that we have for the show was all edited on an iPad, and I did the titles with LumaFusion as well. But yeah,
I do use, and it's amazing. Once you discover keyframes in LumaFusion, your creativity just expands. You can do so much. I mean, even with masking, you can do so much with keyframes. So I do use that.
Okay, really good. There's a question there, I think, from iFilm Visuals. How does your client react when you show up with a smartphone, and how do you deal with that?
I tell them first that I plan to shoot with my iPhone, and if they're okay with that. So I don't kind of show up like, ta-da, this is what I have. So they kind of already know that and I'm kind of now, they know that's what I shoot with. And most of the time, all the time, it's been fine.
Do you ever need to resort to showing a clip from your phone just to kind of go, oh, well, this is a movie shot by Steven Soderbergh on an iPhone. This is a video by Lady Gaga shot on an iPhone. Do you ever have to do that, or is that completely overkill?
Less so. I think earlier when it was still around the iPhone 7 time, you kind of had to prove it. But now I think everybody's seen the commercials and everyone's kind of heard about it. Everyone's sort of bought into it. So it's less so that you're trying to prove the quality. And it's just now what clients ask about is how well can you tell the story? And it's not so much the gear you're shooting with. Yeah.
Very good. Great answer. Yeah, fantastic. Sorry, I overstood another question. For Hannah Afred, what audio gear do you recommend for interviews? I mean, you showed a couple in the stills, but for interviews specifically?
Yeah, I usually use a lavalier, and it depends if I'm shooting 2 people or 1. My gear will kind of change. So I like the Rode Wireless Go a lot, and then it plugs in and plays really well. So sometimes I'll use that, but I typically use some kind of lav for an interview because it's just better audio.
Okay, very good. We're nearly out of time, but I'll take maybe just one more question. I know that there's tons literally in that line. I can't even read through them all. But anyway, if we have one more, the guys in the social media team are going, oh, he dropped us in it, but never mind. It's all good. There we go. Grant March from Cork. Hey, Grant. Hey, Cielo, do you upload to Dropbox over LTE or 4G? Interesting question about data. Yeah.
Sometimes it lags, I have to say. it's sometimes a little bit, it depends on where I am. So I do sometimes wait until I'm at home to offload things and archive it to Dropbox. I don't know what's happening there. So lately also, maybe because everybody's on the internet right now, it's taking forever to upload things to Dropbox. So I make sure that I'm on Wi-Fi most of the time.
Yeah, I have a sneaking suspicion that all the broadband service providers are throttling the connectivity. I'm supposed to be on fiber.
Yeah,
I have
I
about 22 megs
know.
up, but anyway, it's all good. And yet the feed has been perfect tonight, so
I know.
I won't curse us. Listen,
Yeah.
it's been fantastic chatting to you. That has been a hugely informative session. Like I say, I've crammed so much great information in there. We're showing where people can connect with you here on Twitter and YouTube and so on and so forth. So please do reach out to Cielo if you have questions to follow up on our brilliant presentation. But you're going to come back after Photo Joseph and join the group chat, yeah?
Yep, I'll be back.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cielo. We'll see you in about 30 minutes or thereabouts.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, so we have one more speaker remaining. Joining us from Ashland, Oregon is Photo Joseph. And there he is. How are you?
And there he is. Good
You
afternoon.
keeping
Glenn. How you
well?
doing?
Yeah, very well. Joseph, I'm really intrigued because when I was doing a little bit of research about you before tonight, I was looking at your career path. You've had a very fantastic, but a really varied career path. I mean, photography, professional photography, lots of work in the design space. You worked in Apple. Do you want to talk us through that career path?
Yeah, sure. I guess it's a good way of describing perpetually unable to figure out what to do with his life. That's a nice way to put it. I appreciate that. Yeah, just kind of the brief version of it. My history goes with photography and filmmaking. Photography originally goes back to when I was just a little kid. I like to say I was kind of, born with a camera in my hand or shooting since I was knee high to a bug, or pick whatever you like. But my dad was really into photography, so I got into photography at a very, very young age. I owned my first SLR when I was 7 years old. There's a photo of me carrying a little Instamatic camera, holding my mom's hand in the other hand, and I think I was 5 or 6 years old. So I've really been into it for a really, really long time. Did photography in school, like high school yearbook and class historian and all that good stuff. And I studied photography in university, and that's what I got a degree in. And while I was in university, as I was kind of wrapping that up, Photoshop 1.0 was just coming out or had just come out. And so that whole world of digital image editing and manipulation was just beginning. And this is really pre-digital photography, but that whole digital world really intrigued me. And I ended up stepping out of photography and into the software world. There's a company, the first company I went to work for is something called HSC Software originally, and then it became Meta Tools and eventually Meta Creations. And some listeners out there of a certain age will remember software called Kai's Power Tools. That was that company. So I got involved with them, and I worked with them for a while, and that evolved into a career internationally, working for them, doing kind of marketing and evangelism, which then ultimately brought me to Apple. And at Apple, I was working on video stuff at first with Final Cut. And then this, of course, would be Final Cut. Final Cut 1. That's right. It was actually Final Cut 1.25 when I first started working at Apple. And I was there at Apple throughout the entire history of Final Cut. Final Cut 10 came, I think, right after I left. But also while I was there, Aperture came out. And first iPhoto and then Aperture. And that kind of pulled me back into the world of photography. And so I've kind of gone back and forth a bit. And as that career kind of ended, I moved into doing what I'm doing now, which is professional still photography, video production. Today I call myself a content creator. It's what the kids are calling it these days. And I make content for YouTube. I make content for clients. It could be still, it could be video. I kind of mix the two equally, although I guess these days it's more video production. And and a lot of education, and putting education in the mix the whole time. I do a lot with education, whether it's educating on YouTube or on LinkedIn Learning. I have courses on there, or working directly with people, or doing workshops, seminars, those kinds of things. So kind of all over the place, but it's been a fun career.
Yeah, sounds every bit of it. I'm kind of curious. It's a question that I posed to Justine and Jenna at the start of this session, which was, when it becomes a job, is there a risk that you lose the fun or lose the passion?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's very much a risk for that. And I think that you really want to make sure that you don't lose focus of why you're doing what you're doing. I love to shoot. I love the whole process of telling a story visually, whether that's through still photography or the moving image, the cinematography. It's that storytelling craft that I love. And it's funny because that storytelling craft could be like a photojournalistic style telling the story of, X thing, or it could be telling the story of a product or how to use a product. And that to me is often equally as interesting. And as long as you don't lose track of that part of it, I think you'll be okay. But it is very easy to end up, say, as a YouTuber, for example, if you're trying to really make your entire career in YouTube, and I certainly don't make my entire income out of YouTube, but I'm trying to make as much of it as I can out of there. But if that's your only goal, it's easy to start chasing the algorithm and no longer be chasing your passion. And I think it's the YouTuber Sarah Dietschy had a comment or a phrase once. She said that you do one video for the audience or for the algorithm, and you do one for yourself. And as long as you strike that balance, you'll be able to keep that up for sure. I think it also helps to have really totally unrelated hobbies that you do that you never turn into a profession on the side.
Sure. And then in relation to kind of workflow, as a professional photographer, I presume you're shooting with probably high-end DSLR, possibly even medium format. When it comes to video, what do you use?
So I'm actually sponsored by Panasonic. I'm a Lumix ambassador. So all of my cameras are the Lumix lineup. So that's the Micro Four Thirds cameras like the GH5 and the G9, and the full frame cameras like the S1 and the S1H for cinema production. So that's where I'm in, and it's, take off my Panasonic hat and I can still tell you it's absolutely fantastic. It's a really great platform, and I absolutely love shooting with it.
Okay, and the one thing that always strikes me about your content, it's similar to something I said to Henny a little bit earlier, is, and I think people grossly underestimate the art of this, but again, lighting, because you've come from a photography background, you intimately understand how to light. Even your lighting right now, like it's Rembrandt lighting, it's kind of such a little plunk of light directly over the camera there, it'll all be good, I mean, do you think the risk with mobile is that people tend to underestimate the art, the real, the skill, because it's just a big white button, isn't it? How hard can it be?
Sure. I think the risk there, the risk isn't because it's mobile. I think the risk is because people start with mobile and have that assumption that it is very easy. Someone who's got a background in it doesn't pick up an iPhone and suddenly forget about lighting, forget about composition, forget about storytelling. That's all still there. It doesn't matter what camera they're using. And, whenever you see people on Twitter or something say, oh, I could do that if I had that camera. It's like, really? You really think so? Go on, I'll give you a red, give me an iPhone, and let's see who can get a better shot. It has nothing to do with the camera. That's ridiculous. Obviously, cameras have features and functions that you want. They're better quality and so on, but the ability to tell the story, make the image, irrelevant what camera you're holding. So when it comes to things like lighting, I think if you never take the time to learn it, and this is like any art, any craft, if you don't take the time to learn it and learn the basics, you're never going to get good at it, right? Some people might get lucky and just have some innate ability and just naturally see things a certain way, but you've got to learn how to walk before you can run. And it's tempting to not bother because cameras. How many people have you come across who've never taken their big fancy DSLR out of the green square fully automatic mode? It's so easy, and the camera does such a good job. But if you don't learn why, when you change shutter speed, this happens, what happens when you change the aperture, what the effect is and how they combine, then you lose a lot of that creative control. So I think it's important to learn that, even though you may not feel like you need to, because the things you'll learn along the way, you don't know what you don't know until you start really learning it.
Yeah, appreciation of aesthetic goes a long way. What's your post-production workflow? You're going to talk us through some of what you do in post.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a huge fan of the mobile editing idea, being able to go out on the road and edit anywhere. But I'm not going to lie, I love being at my big editing station I'm sitting in front of right now, big 32-inch screen, multiple screens, reference monitor, big hard drive RAIDs and all that. So that's all wonderful, and I'm never giving that up. It's an awesome thing to be able to work with. But I love that mobile side of it. And so as much as I can, I like to be able to kind of bridge those two gaps. And that's really what my kind of overarching topic is today, is about bridging that gap and going from the mobile editing to desktop, which is now completely possible. And I've got a little short couple-minute demo to show you at the end of taking your project from LumaFusion and moving that over to Final Cut, which is actually a new feature in there. But before I go into that, I kind of wanted to talk about the rationale behind it a bit and why we even want to do this as creatives and as editors. And I think a big part of it is what we refer to as the lean forward versus the lean back experience. When you think about most work, whether that is you're creating content or you're working on spreadsheets or you're writing a book or whatever it is you're doing, we think of that as a lean forward. You're at a computer, you lean forward, you're doing something on the computer. That's that. And then the lean back experience is the consumption side of it. So it's the creation when you're leaning forward and the consumption when you're leaning back. And we lean back on the couch with a phone or a tablet or whatever, and or the TV up on the wall, and we watch movies, we read books, we do things to consume the content that was created in that work phase. And that's kind of a very normal, traditional way to look at it. But for people like myself and basically every other creative out there who really, to whom this is what their life is creating content, creating imagery, creating stories, we're always on. There is no, oh, I'm at work and then I go home and I do something completely different. You're always on. You're always working. And you can't always be leaning forward to work. You can't always be leaning in. Sometimes you have to lean back. And the ability to do your photo and video editing in that lean back mode is phenomenal. But it also can't just be there because you still need to be able to bridge that gap and bring it forward. So for me, like my dream, one day I'll be able to be at my desktop like this, be working on a project, and then just because I want to, pick up an iPad and go sit on the couch or go to the cafe or jump on a flight somewhere and have flying, remember those days? And be able to take that same project with me completely seamlessly. We're not there yet for video. We're pretty far off from that for video, but we are there for still photography, which is a really good sign of where things will go. If you're using Lightroom, you can have your exact same library on your desktop that's on your iOS device, on your Android, on your tablet, on your phone even, and have access to the same photos and the same tools and the same manipulation anywhere. And I can sit down on the couch, do something, stand up, and that something is already on my computer. And I absolutely love that. And one day, well, we want to see that for video. But if you look back at the kind of history of all this editing for both photo and video, it all started in big, dark, expensive rooms with big, expensive hardware that was bolted to the floor and didn't move. And the editing was linear editing with actual celluloid and big, heavy hardware, and the last thing that you would think of as portable. And then it moved forward into nonlinear editing and being on computers, and you had these computer solutions that were $250,000, but you had these big hard drives and big computers and big screens, and you could edit. And then those $250,000 software solutions came down to $100,000, and then they came down to $1,000, and then they come down to $30, and you can get stuff that is so inexpensive that allows you to do these, and not only do it at the desktop, but on the road. And that doesn't just mean putting it on a laptop, but actually putting it on that truly mobile touch device that gives you that lean back experience. And the fact that we've gotten to that point today is phenomenal. And the next step is being able to bridge that gap to go in between. And I think it's worth talking about too, why you even want to be totally mobile like that. Like, it's easy to say, well, yeah, but editing, like video editing, film editing, it's a big thing. Like, you want to sit in front of a big computer and do that. Why do you even want to do that out on the road? And there's so many different reasons. Obviously, it's not for everybody, but there's so many different reasons to do it. Whether it's on the professional level, someone on a film set wanted to do rough cuts on set, pulling dailies, pulling the rushes, and doing rough cuts and getting those off to an editor back in the studio or whatever it might be, to be able to do that pre-visualization kind of work on the set. But as a smaller creator, to be able to create while you're out on the road, and for some people, maybe even deliver from that mobile device. And that's awesome. If you want to go all the way to delivery on there, you certainly can. The tools are there. But if you want to be able to take it up to the desktop, that's a great experience to be able to do as well. One of the really good examples I think of it when I think of this is travel. If you're doing travel vlogging or travel cinematography or just whatever, you're traveling, you obviously don't want to carry a huge amount of gear. And so if you can have a nice lightweight mirrorless camera and an iPad in a small bag, and to be able to be on the road for an indefinite amount of time, shooting and editing as you go, but then you know that you're going to get back one day to your main computer and you're going to do your really high-end color grade on your reference monitor, and you're going to do all the fancy effects that you want to do, and all of that's going to come later. To know that you can do all that work while you're on the road and then translate it over and not lose a single thing I think it's absolutely huge. And that's what we're getting now. It's very recently, we now have this, that's what we have now with LumaFusion and moving your projects over to Final Cut Pro.
Forgot to unmute my microphone. Sorry.
Oops,
You're gonna walk us through that actual workflow. You're gonna show us exactly what it involves, because I mean, I read the press release. I have Final Cut Pro on a Mac somewhere, which I don't think I've even launched. It's definitely going to say you need to update this software as soon as I try. But you can step us through the process, because I would really like to see how seamless this process is to move the XML file basically off the iPad.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's do it. So I've got my iPad set up over here, and this is a sample project that I built actually explicitly for this, and it's not like a real movie or vlog. It has a couple things in here so I can show you what the software can do. But what we've got in here in LumaFusion is a timeline that has, let's start off with the title. So you see a title on there with some graphics behind it. And one of the important things to point out about this process is, and we'll talk about this a couple times as we move it over, not absolutely everything can translate, and that's just the nature of the language and the fact that the two different apps, LumaFusion and Apple, are made by two different companies. So things like titling doesn't necessarily translate over as an editable, titleable piece, but it comes over as a graphic. And so that's the very first thing in here is this title, which here in LumaFusion is totally editable, but we'll see when it goes over to Final Cut that it becomes a graphic. So there are limitations in there, but absolutely none of these limitations that you can't easily work around. So we got this title to begin with, and you see there's a transition out, the little cross dissolve that goes out to an image underneath, and then there's another second clip right here on top of that. So we got a couple layers. We have 3 layers so far in there, and a transition over. You can see audio underneath it. There's a couple of different audio tracks in there, and you can even see, if you look at the white line along that bottom audio track, you can see how it changes levels and changes volumes. And then we get into motion effects. So here's keyframed effects where the image is cropped and it moves over, and then another one that's already cropped fades in. And then I jump to this kind of 4-up just to show all the different things. So we have movement, we have crop that's changing, we have the spinning, a lot of different things happening there at once. And that's all part of the, just part of an edit, right? And then let's see, this one has a speed change on it and a big slow fade out, dissolve, and then audio at the end. So pretty, the kind of things you would find in a normal project. Transitions, dissolves, audio fades, titling, all those kind of normal things you would expect to find. Okay, so now you want to export this over to Final Cut. So down in the bottom right corner, you have a share button. Tap the share button, and one of the options is XML project package. First choice is where you're going to send it to. You can drop it into the iOS file system, or you can airdrop it, whatever you like. So I'll just choose the airdrop option. And on this page, you'll see a little bit of information here that helps to explain to you what will and won't carry over. So this is what I mentioned at the very beginning. If there's things that won't carry over, it will tell you here what won't. So you know in advance what's not going to happen on the other side. And underneath that, you have a really interesting and important option. So this is your FTP project settings, include full media, trimmed media, or no relinkable media. So the full media option takes the entirety of every clip. So that means if you shot a 10-minute clip and you only use 5 seconds, you're going to get that full 10-minute clip copied over. So that's going to give you the most flexibility because you can go in and re-edit however you want to, but it is also going to take up the most space. It's going to be the biggest file size. Okay, so the next option, the trimmed media, will trim the clips down to just what you need, plus a couple of seconds handles, so that you can go in there and slip the shot a little bit, but you can't completely re-edit it. So you have that capability. And then the last option is the one that most people will use who are doing a more advanced workflow, who are regularly doing this. I think the first 2 options are great for a more casual shooter, editor who wants to just occasionally move a project over and not really think about it too much. But the last step, a little bit more involved, is the most powerful, and that's the one that has no relinkable media. And what that means is no project, no media that could be relinked inside the other app, in this case Final Cut, will be carried over. So that's all of your original content that you shot would not be copied over. And one of the important things about this, and I'll give you a kind of a heads up on working with iOS in this space right now, is the traditional way to work with LumaFusion. And by traditional, I mean in the 1.0 era of LumaFusion. Now, of course, we're in the 2.0 era. With the 1.0 era, you imported your media into the Apple Photos app, and then you import it again from Apple Photos into LumaFusion. It was a 2-step process. And you can still do that today. But the problem when you do that is Apple Photos does this really weird thing where it assigns a unique ID to every file that comes in that then is completely disconnected from the original file that was still on your SD card, on your capture card. And so what that means is if you copy your files into Photos and then you go into LumaFusion, you edit, and then you export with no relinkable media, in Final Cut, it'll have absolutely no idea what the original media is. It won't be able to find it on your SD card. So you need to bypass Apple Photos, which is actually the better way to work now anyway, and that is to import directly into LumaFusion. The LumaFusion now has the ability through, I just got the new one here, through your SD card reader for your iPad, you can import this time to make sure it's the right one. You can import directly into LumaFusion, so bypassing Photos altogether, so it saves a step in there. And once it's in LumaFusion, there's no weird content ID happening, so when you move it over to Final Cut with no relinkable media, you choose that choice, you'll be able to take that same media off your SD card and import it onto Final Cut, and they will match up perfectly. So that's the differences in the workflow there. So just important things to understand about that. Anyway, so you choose whatever you're going to choose, and then down at the bottom it tells you an estimated file size, so you can see how big those would be. So you can see the difference there in this particular project. The full media would be 400 megs, and the trimmed is just 200. And then you share it. Tap on the share button up here, give it a name, and off you go. Now I would usually do this over AirDrop, and I've actually already dropped it, so I don't have to wait for it. So I'm going to jump over to Final Cut Pro, and in Final Cut Pro, let's switch to the Finder, and here is that project. So XML export in my downloads folder. Here's all the original media. There's the music. There's the title that got brought over as a .png file, so that's how that was translated. And then there is the XML file. So you can just double click on that to open it, or go into Final Cut and choose Import XML. Choose that XML file and take a couple of seconds, and that's it. There's all that same media. There's the music file down there, and there's that graphic, and there's the project. I open up that project, and there it is. There is that same project with that title, the cross dissolves, the fades, the second track of footage, another dissolve in there, and then we'll go over here. We've got a wipe dissolve in there, so see you had that, even had the wipe come through. You've got the motion with the cropping, all the different layers of motion with the rotation and the animated cropping and all that, and everything is in there. And just to kind of put the two side by side, let me do this. I'll swatch back and forth. Let me pinch this out so you can see the whole thing, and you can really see that it is the same timeline. It's fantastic the way that works. And that's it. Now that it's in Final Cut, I just do whatever I'm going to do in Final Cut Pro. That's all there is to it.
It's phenomenal, actually. Yeah. So, I mean, I train journalists mainly for broadcasters, and you can just see how they can do a rough cut in the car on their phone on the way back to the station, basically, and then just export the project over for finishing in the Craft Edit suite. Like, it's transformative. And we're not quite at a time. We're nearly getting there. So I'm going to fire open for some questions, because I know people are going to want to know more about this. We're going to the lighting. The Dilomo, may I ask how many lights do you use and what kind, portable or cabled?
How many do I use on what kind of a set? I have a lot of lights. I have a lot of different lights, just depending on what you're doing. But the lights that are, for example, right now that are lighting me, the lights are from a company called Nanlite, Nanlite, I think is right. And they make these really nice, big, soft panels. So the panel that's up here, the light source that's up here, is, I'm going to call it like a 2.5 foot, maybe 2 foot, 2.5 foot diagonal panel. And that's just one big soft light source right there. And then I have a second one that's a bit smaller, that's off to the side here, that's a little bit of a fill light on here. And so this scenario, not including the background, but this scenario is just these two lights. Whether I'm using battery or wall powered, it just depends on what I'm doing. Clearly, having battery powered is super convenient, even in the studio, because you can put it on a stand and move it around. You don't have to worry about tripping over cables. But batteries run out, and then you have to replace them. And so I tend to only use battery powered stuff when I'm actually in the field. I have a couple lights that are on stands, on rolling stands, that are battery powered, that I use for quick things that I move around. And I use those so rarely that the batteries, I probably only have to charge them once a month or so. But for most of my work, everything's run into the mains, because I don't want to have to worry about changing batteries. Even my cameras. If I can put a camera into the wall, I will, just so I never have to worry about it running out of battery mid-shoot.
Interesting. And do you use strobes as well as constant lights? You do?
Yeah, for still photography, absolutely. I almost never use LED lights for still photography. You just get so much more light out of a strobe, and your cost per light output is so much better with strobes. You can get so much more light for so much less. It's just that light comes out at a very, very small fraction of a second. So for still photography, it's great. If you wanted to, for example, build a really big softbox with LED lights, that's going to take a lot of light to put out enough light to be able to capture a photo at a shutter speed that is adequate for any even remote motion. Mm-hmm. Whereas with a strobe, a couple of pocket strobes will fill a room, and it's for cheap. So yeah, it's a big difference there. I use strobes for most still photography.
Very good. So another question here from Adjective Beaver. So Joseph mentioned learning light. Do you have any favorite learning resources for this? Do you do any tutorials on lighting, or where would you recommend people learn?
I've done, so my YouTube channel, Photo Joseph on YouTube, I have a few videos on there about lighting. I've never done a full lighting course. I have a lot of training on LinkedIn Learning. It used to be lynda.com, now LinkedIn Learning, and on my Photo Joseph channel on YouTube and the photojoseph.com website. There's a ton of different types of training in there. I've never done a full course on lighting though. Lighting is one of those things that you can find a lot of really good information on YouTube. It's for free, which is super super awesome.
Very good. Okay, great. Loads of questions queuing up in here. So Kellen Kerwin, hi Kellen. By going more mobile, do you think clients put more pressure on you to deliver quicker? You can edit now on the train, plane, the hotel room, or at an event.
Interesting question. I don't think being mobile has anything to do with that. I think that people want fast turnaround just because that's the world we live in. It has to be done quick, and people like to wait till the last minute to request things. But the fact that things can be mobile, no, I wouldn't say they do. And if I have to go on location, then I don't make any expectations the project's going to be done before I get back or anything like that. Like, I'll give a schedule and know it'll be done after I get back, and I'll finish it up.
Okay, very good, great. We'll take a couple more. Foot Trap 10, Joseph's stream is so smooth and in sync. What is your encoding setup? And you're seamlessly switching between your Mac and your iPad and your camera. So go on.
Yeah, so the switching, well, I'm not doing any encoding. The encoding side is all through this StreamYard system that we're using here. So I don't think anything I'm doing would have any effect on me versus any of the other speakers. It might just be that might be a bandwidth issue. I do have pretty decent internet here, but the switching side of it, I'm using a Blackmagic A10 Mini, which is a hardware switcher that allows me to switch between up to 4 inputs. And so I have on there just one button touch to go from me to my computer to my iPad. And then there's a fourth one that I'm not using for this that makes that seamlessly change really, really easily. But yeah.
Very nice. It is very slick, I have to say, in fairness. Okay, another question from Ron Bodger from earlier. Father Joseph, do you have any more LumaFusion tutorials in the making? I watched your previous videos and learned so much valuable content. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ron, for saying that. Absolutely. I'm not quite halfway through all those videos. I need to finish the entire course. Yeah, he's referring to the LumaFusion educational videos that I did for LumaTouch. There's, I think, 28 of them, I think, that are out right now. I've got a lot more to go. So yes, I am. I'm full of excuses why they're not done yet, but that project is ongoing. I will get those out to you, I promise.
Very good. I presume the new keyboard shortcuts and everything else it's like a moving target because their innovation cycle is so fast.
That is always that is definitely the truth.
Okay, another question. Cobra JP. Now that social distancing is a thing, are you using any solutions for remote workflows, backup, network area storage, or are you sharing files with anyone?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, can I? Yeah, I can show this. I use this system for Final Cut. Let me let it launch first, and then I'll switch over to it. Make sure there's nothing sensitive in there, called PostLab. And PostLab, oh, actually, here, we can see on here, it even's got the LumaFusion tutorial project. So PostLab is a system that allows me to seamlessly move Final Cut projects to another editor. And then there's a peer-to-peer file sharing system in the background that moves the files to the editor. So my editor actually does live in the same town as me, but he could live anywhere in the world, it doesn't matter. And the files get in the background overnight, they get synced over to his system. So he sits down in the morning, the files are there. He opens up PostLab and he can open up the Final Cut project. Once he opens it up, I'm locked out of it. He does his work, he saves it, checks it back into PostLab, and then I can open that up and see where he left off. So that is the absolutely best tool. And we were using this long before social distancing was a thing, but it is perfect for this production. And then Frame.io is the service that I use for the client to review the footage. Whatever project I'm working on, whether it's a Panasonic project or a LumaTouch project or whatever, all the videos go up to Frame.io for client review. And it's an amazing service where the clients can go in there and mark up, not just like look at your video and then type in notes. They can actually frame by frame, they can stop the playhead, they can type a note, I don't like what you did here. They can take out a pencil or a mouse and circle something on the screen, change this. It's a phenomenal tool. And all of that will sync back into your Final Cut timeline. Remarkable.
That's phenomenal. Yeah, I hope I'm not spilling the beans, but I watched that interview that Terry and Neil did actually the day before yesterday about the summit. And I think Terry might have mentioned Frame.io in the discussion. So I hope I'm not, she did say it publicly, so don't blame me if I'm letting the cat out of the bag. But that would be really exciting.
Frame.io and LumaFusion integration. But we'll just leave it at that.
Phenomenal. Okay. Right there. Just drop it. Okay, great. Listen, we've run out of time. It's a pleasure to chat to you as always, but you're going to stick with us. And I think everyone else hopefully is going to circle back and join us. So can I welcome back, if Henny is standing by, if Cielo's there, if Justine and Jenna are all with us. Hey, there's Henny. And there's Jenna. And there's Justine. Hello, everybody. And there's Cielo. Hey.
Hello.
Okay, so there's been a phenomenal amount of questions. Again, I'm struggling even just to stay on top of them, but the social media team has been trying to choose some of the best and greatest ones from across the evening. So I might ask them to fire some up as opposed to just my questions, although I might wrap up with a couple of ones that have been burning a hole in my pocket, so to speak, for the last hour and a half. So let's see if there are any questions from the social media team. No, they're standing by on it. Okay, fine. Here's a clanger. In 5 years' time, right? So mobile is 10 years old. I know. I can see people just looking at the skies. Thank you so much for that. Look, mobile 10 years' time. In a broadcast TV environment, I've had the whole fight with engineers and with camera people and everyone else to try and convince them mobile is not just good enough; it's bloody more than good enough. But over that 10 years, we've come from virtually no camera. I mean, what was it? 2 megapixel way back in the day to 12 now, which is more than enough for 4K. 8K may well be on the horizon. I mean, according to Samsung, it's the next big thing. What do you think? 5 years time, like, where do we go next? Anybody?
Wow. I'll grab it. We've seen already the evolution of the smartphone cameras, how it's progressed so quickly, and it's all because of computational photography, which also means computational cinematography. But the sensors are tiny, right? The sensors are basically rubbish, and the lenses are rubbish. They're tiny, tiny little things, and so the only thing that makes the image as good as it is the computer science behind it, and that is just going to get better and better. You know, we're seeing multiple lenses on cameras now, and not only is that to give you a wide and a tight field of view, but they can get blended together to do incredible things with 3D depth mapping and so on. We're going to see more and more of that, and you're going to see things happening in the mobile space that you simply can't do on bigger cameras because they're just not doing that computational photography side of things. So we're definitely going to see advances in quality. Low light is getting better and better. That's just going to keep improving. High dynamic range is just going to keep improving. All of that's just going to keep getting better.
I think it's like ease of use as well. And especially because I know there's, for example, like Insta360, they just came out with their Insta1 camera, where it's basically a modular camera. So you now have one body. You can swap out all of the little accessories. They have a 1-inch sensor. And something they're doing with their new app is kind of like AI editing. And because it will also shoot 360, it will kind of determine what it thinks that you want in frame and basically just edit you a video. So I think that's going to be really interesting, is things are just going to be auto edited. And I know DJI is doing a lot with that type of stuff with like their Osmo, and it'll just edit you together like these little mini stories. And a lot of times, you know, they come kind of standard because they are these cookie cutter things that you see everybody posting, but they're so well done and so easy that just to have something that quick to be able to share out to social is sometimes it's good enough for what you need it to be.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, as I think more and more as we move forward, a lot of hardware makers are making their hardware compatible with the phone. So there are these apps. So the Insta360, you know, like the Osmo Pocket. I think more and more things will work with the phone. So the phone will kind of be the base, and everything's kind of a bunch of extensions coming out to it until that sensor does get bigger.
And I mean, the last thing for me is just thinking about immersive audio and VR. You know, I mean, we're in a state where people are getting more and more comfortable every day being in the comforts of their own home. So, you know, 5 years from now, could we see some type of a mobile virtual, you know, glasses or some type of immersive audio glass, you know, situation where it's, you know, VR plus immersive audio, where you can be a Laker fan and live in Atlanta and have immersive audio and VR, be able to see, you know, have a season pass to watch the games like it's real time. I think we're in a day and age where, you know, as long as the streaming becomes faster and more fluid, you're going to see more and more applications, you know, input those types of situations where it's VR, it's voice, and it's immersive audio. Yeah.
Interesting. Jenna, forensic scientist, what's your take?
Well, nothing in the forensics field, but actually the Samsung S20, I did a 8K vlog with it just to test out, you know, the quality and everything like that. And I didn't edit it on mobile, but using my fully maxed out MacBook Pro, it was having a lot of difficulty compressing and uploading. So I will say that, you know, the 8K, the quality of the camera, considering it's in this tiny little phone, you know,
it was incredible. But as for, the internet speeds and the compression, I'm curious to see, when 5G is a thing, how that will maybe impact, the 8K speeds and things like that. But as for the quality of phones now, I'm very, very excited to see what 5 years is going to be like, because it's pretty good now.
And even
If you think about-
accessories, if you like the moment lenses and stuff like that,
Mhm.
adds a
Oh,
whole
yeah.
other kind of aspect onto what you can do. So it's just, I love the accessories.
I do think that the machine learning / artificial intelligence stuff, people still don't realize what that potentially will do. But Justine, I think you touched on it, the auto editing thing. So I saw a post on LinkedIn recently, someone from IBM was talking about how they were teaching, what's their platform again? Oh, it'll come to me. Watson. They were teaching it. It was scanning hundreds of thousands of hours of content on YouTube, so it could start to identify the patterns being used for editing, which means the algorithm will then learn the different types of editing styles. So here's the hypothesis. Don't be scared much. So you, as you said, they're not just using a simple algorithm. You get your content, Watson looks at it and it's like, hey, Watson, cut it film noir style. And it's scanned every film noir film ever made and kind of goes, oh, we know exactly what to do with this. Boom, there it is, done.
Wow.
Like, I mean, the scary bit though, I mean, like we're in all of our fields, we're all professionals that make a living doing what we do. If you marry that up with those animated fake characters that look completely real. Did you ever see that thing on Chinese state TV where they had this virtual character that looked completely human? It was scary as hell.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's going to be interesting too, just with AR and, like facial recognition and stuff like that. Like you easily can create your own character. I mean, that would be great if I had a character of myself. Like I wouldn't have to brush my hair. I mean, this is going to be great for social distancing.
I know.
I'll be like, this is
Makeup.
incredible. But yeah, I think the future of that, it's going to be interesting. And Apple's doing a lot in the augmented reality space. But I mean, I love VR and that whole world, but I still feel like for the everyday, common, normal person, like people don't really have headsets yet. And the content isn't there. And to produce that content, it's this whole extra added step. Like we did a couple 180 videos, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people are just watching YouTube videos in their headsets. So it's kind of fascinating that you have this VR headset and you're just sitting there watching YouTube videos. So the 180 is kind of interesting because you kind of get that perspective without having to get up and turn around.
Yeah, very, very true. Okay, questions are flying in fast. Here we go. Emily Sousa, what are your opinions on vertical video? Sorry. With platforms such as TikTok and Instagram stories, and what do you think the future is? Is it vertical? Justine, I know your answer, so skipping along nicely, and I'm joking. Go on.
Oh, no, I love it. It's funny because when it originally first started, I was like so just offended anytime somebody would film a vertical video and try to post it on YouTube. And then slowly, like I kind of was sort of getting into it because it's a whole nother type of editing style. You have to frame shots differently. So it really is a completely different type of thing. But I mean, we all know I love TikTok and I also love Instagram stories. And I think doing an Instagram story series very well takes a lot more time than you would think. I know at CES this year, I did a couple of different brand deals where we're like, yeah, this will be great. Just a few Instagram stories. It'll be easy. And you end up spending way more time trying to get approvals for stories to make sure that they're framed right. You get all of those things said in 15 seconds and you end up spending more time than you could have just created like a 15-minute YouTube video. So those types of things happen very often.
Interesting. Anyone else experimenting with vertical? Jenna.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, even Samsung at CES showcased their, new vertical display. So it's like, are we going to be getting vertical TVs? Like, I highly doubt it. But just even thinking in that mindset, it's like vertical video, is it here to stay? It seems like, I don't know what the percentage of people consuming content on mobile is, but I know it's pretty high. And now if, we're thinking about it for TVs, I feel like it's not going to go anywhere.
I feel like
It
you
is
could fit a vertical TV in more spaces, actually, now that you're thinking about it. Like
Maybe.
You got to look at it this way to make it work, though. So, I mean, that's not practical.
That's not.
Storytelling, though, do you not think that's the nature of storytelling for vertical is quite different? I mean, if you take this statistic, I don't know, was it Facebook said it, 80% of social media content is watched mute. Okay, clearly YouTube, different set of rules. But if you take the Facebook one, and I presume that applies to Twitter and potentially Instagram too, if you're not hearing the sound, you got to drive it with text. You got to drive it with both visuals. I thought this was an interesting takeaway from the filmmaking panel earlier. They talked about the first version of the edit. Actually, I don't want to listen to the sound. I want to just see if the pictures tell the story. That's a really interesting takeaway. But do you not think that the format, like for TikTok, Justine, you mentioned previously that you spend bloody ages, not your words, I'm taking advantage, but take ages to do a TikTok story.
Yeah, especially because if you're trying to cut something down into a minute or 15 seconds, like you have to be very precise, be very just, make sure that those edits are actually lining up. But I think the storytelling is different, especially the framing. And I think we were talking before, like sometimes you will have to shoot something horizontal and then go redo it and shoot it vertical, which is why I like things like Insta360, because you can shoot it once and then sort of capture it and export out into whatever format you need. So things like that are super helpful when shooting stuff for social.
Cielo, have you done much in the vertical space?
Yeah, and I think I don't think it's going to go away, unfortunately. I think it's kind of here to stay, but in certain areas. So it will be, it's great for Instagram. TikTok is embracing it. And I think it's just here to stay. And there's a time for it and there's a time not to use it. And so it's kind of like, where are you publishing to? Who's your audience? And that's kind of the decision you have to make, whether to go vertical or horizontal.
Okay, that's really good advice. Joseph, I'm going to just presume that because we're similar in age, the whole vertical thing, you just don't get it. I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not making assumptions, okay? But
I will say that I used to be completely anti. What are you doing holding your phone that way to shoot video? Come on. But I get it that that's how people consume, and you want to deliver video content in the way that people are going to consume it. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen people watching a landscape video while holding their phone vertically, and they're just looking at a little strip. And I reach over and I turn their phone, right? Look at it this way.
I do it. I'm guilty.
I do it too.
It's on the rotate lock, so you just even if you film switch.
There you go. So since people are delivering that way, I want them to enjoy my content in as full screen as possible. And so you're gonna have to deliver it that way. I've done very little with TikTok or anything else like that, so I hardly ever deliver any vertical content. But I get it, and it is definitely here to stay. And I'd say that whole Samsung rotating TV, though, I don't think that's going to be a thing, because you don't want to watch TikTok style content while sitting back in your living room. That's something you consume on your phone.
I mean, I might, but
Okay, there was a great question came in there a second ago in relation to, there it is. So Nathan Walton, how long did it take you before you got to the point where you felt like I could probably do this for a living and quit my day job now?
probably 5 years after I quit my day job.
Oh, wow. That's what you call a leap of faith right there. Okay.
For sure. Yeah. I think, it's a different situation for everyone. So I think until you do feel comfortable or even maybe not feel comfortable, but you're just, have that kind of drive to try to make it happen, I think is important. So I think it's different for everybody.
Okay, interesting. And Cielo, are you doing it full time? Or are you doing it part time?
No, it's not my day job. I would love for it to be, but one, I live in the Bay Area, which is one of the most expensive places. So I don't see that in my future for a while. I've been doing YouTube and videos for 3 years, not quite there yet. So definitely, it hasn't happened in 3 years.
Okay, but when you hear Justine's story about being at it 16 years or whatever the number is, you realize there's a road ahead. It takes time.
Oh yeah. I'll get there. Working on it. As long as you don't stop.
The 5-year mark. Exactly. Yes. Don't quit.
That's the magic number. Is it 5 years? Okay. Jenna, what about you? What's your experience been?
I mean, I started in college, so it was kind of like after I graduated college, I was like, okay, I have a forensic biology degree and a biology degree. Do I take the leap of faith? Do I go, into what I went to school for and get a job in that field? Or do I just move to LA, do YouTube and see what happens? And thankfully it did work out. And also thankfully I had my sister who, lived out there already. So I could, sleep on her couch for 3 months until I was able to, get myself an apartment. But just the consistency and being consistent and sticking to it, it did work out for me, thankfully. But it could have went either way.
That's the thing. It's one number I have in the back of my head. I've often wondered, like, for every person who, in inverted commas, makes it, how many people are there for who the dream is shattered and they're back to the day job? There must be huge volumes. But I think the key, and I will ask Kenny and Photojust on this as well, but do you not think that the key thing is, and I think you've all kind of said it in various different ways, one, building up the confidence and realize you don't need tons of gear necessarily to be able to create a great thing. Story and having a presence is probably the single most important thing. I don't know if you buy that or not. The second thing is this idea of having something to say and knowing who your tribe is, knowing who it is that you're speaking to at the other end of the camera, so that they develop a relationship with you, and that trust and that community starts to build up around it. Do you think that's fair, or what would your take be? I'm interested, Henny, actually, on that one. Like where you know, because you have this hybrid of the music and the vlogging thing, it's a really, really interesting and dynamic thing.
I think, going back to, like what Jenna was saying, I started out in college as well. And, for the most part, it was just like, I did not want to go into a regular job, and music was it, 20 years ago. I'll age myself, it's cool. But at the end of the day, understanding that it's going to take time, and you got to figure out who, like you said, who is your audience, who are you speaking towards, and who actually is going to give you the best constructive criticism to be able to get better, and become more comfortable, and now I'm 3.5 years into YouTube, and I have that same mind state, not thinking that just because I was, a Grammy Award winning producer, that it's just going to be a layup for me to be able to be on YouTube. No, I think that's where a lot of people fail when they've been successful in one space and not realizing it's still going to take those 3 to 5 years. Like, Justine was saying, like, you got to make sure you go in and you stay at it, you stay persistent, and you understand your community. And once you understand your community, you understand your niche, you'll be able to grow. And that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Very
Going
good
into
advice.
that, I waited way too long to go into TikTok. So it's like I thought I was going to join TikTok and have 1 million followers overnight. And that is definitely not the case because it's a completely different platform. So it's like the type of content that you're creating on TikTok is not the kind of stuff that I post on YouTube. So even when I started reposting the TikToks on Instagram, people were like, why are you being so weird? I was like, no, this is actually just me. You just are used to my more serious YouTube stuff. So I think knowing, like you guys were saying before too, like what platform you were creating for, it is completely different. And I'm still at it with TikTok. I'm still having fun with it. I think as long as you're enjoying what you're doing is really very, very important.
So if the format is new and if the audience is different, does that give you more creative freedom?
Yeah, you get to just kind of experiment more, which is really fun.
Interesting. Joseph, you and I are just going to have to sign up for TikTok and start doing them, man. I'll collab
Come on,
with
guys.
you.
This
I'll
is
collab
great.
with you. We'll build our following.
There's some cool challenges on there that you can do.
Yeah.
I'm telling you,
that
because
whole like dancing in front of the camera thing, that's definitely not me. But I did take a stab, and I can't say I took a serious stab at it. What if I did like 60-second editing tutorials on TikTok? Because people are going to eventually want to start making more serious videos. And so I did a vertically formatted how to edit in Final Cut video. And it was a lot of work to put that together, to take what's normally a widescreen aspect ratio and move it all around to make it fit. It didn't get very many views, and I didn't expect like that one to blow up or anything. And I know I'd have to do a lot of them, but I kind of did that one and realized this is probably more work than I really want to put in at this time. I got other stuff to do, but if I had more time, certainly, why not?
Yeah, but I mean, at the same time, you watch certain TikToks and people will give you that information and that education where it's like, whether it's about the stimulus check and the guy's telling you, this is what's going to happen. This is what's, at the end of 2020, you're going to see that, whatever it is when you're educating your audience, people are always going to be there to want to soak up that, that knowledge. So.
And I think you would have to do it like a different way too. So like I tried to do a traditional like LumaFusion tutorial on TikTok, and it didn't really work out very well either. Like nobody watched it. Yeah. So, I mean, it did if you would watch the whole thing, but you have to do it in the way that other people are doing things on TikTok, like more of a challenge type thing. So we probably tried to overproduce, which is the exciting part about TikTok, because sometimes you don't have to overproduce it as much as you would like on YouTube or something. So I would say give it another try, because it really is a fun platform.
Yeah.
And the algorithm is interesting because it learns the things that you like. So if there's other filmmakers and people out there, like they will start getting served your type of content. So that is the one thing that's really interesting about it.
That is interesting. Okay, great. I better
Yeah,
take
the
another
discovery
question.
part of TikTok is really great. It's really easy to discover videos that you'll like.
Cool. There's a question here from the Nerd Fonz. Questions for all. Gimbal versus software stabilization. If you're just starting with filming in your phone, which is a better investment of time and money versus results?
Hardware.
Yeah,
Hold your phone steady. It's got pretty good stabilization already,
Right? Is it
I'd
not
say. But
budget?
hey,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say
if you
get
need
the
more than
iPhone
just holding
11.
your phone- go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Wait, I'm trying to wait. Where are you? You're over there. Okay, there. It's okay.
So I was saying The iPhone
Oh, go ahead.
11 Pro has the ultra wide lens. And after I got this phone, I use my gimbal a lot less because that lens is really stable. So I'd go with the phone.
And sometimes you'll have a gimbal and you'll end up missing the shot because you're too busy messing around trying to like make sure everything's like set up perfectly. But I mean, really what it comes down to is just like you want to get the shot, get the shot.
Yep, I think that's good advice. And again, you know, I mean, I say this a lot. I like many of you, I train people as well, and I genuinely discourage them from spending loads of money on gear up front, and actually try and put a bit more energy into learning the apps and actually learning the limitations of the phone first. Once you get good at that, then start to, you know, cherry pick where you're going to drop the money. But you don't need to spend a fortune up front. You already have the single most important tool in your pocket, you know,
Right.
and a huge part of today has been showing you what you can do with just a couple of apps. Filmic and LumaFusion obviously being two of them, but you've seen so many more shared over the course of the day as well. Okay, I'll take a few more questions. We're nearly out of time. It's been a phenomenal session. It's flipped by. Max Schlesser, hey Max, how are you? As there are more and more smartphones, do you think stories can be made more collaborative? That's an interesting one.
Stories made more collaborative. I wonder, is that in the sense of like editing or just like easier to make videos with each other?
There's a few interesting ones. I'll throw a few out at you. I can't. Now I'm really starting to show my age. Alzheimer's is real. There was an app, not Collaboracam, pre-Collaboracam. There was an app where you launch the app. Oh, the name will come to me. And when you're filming, everyone else within a 2-kilometer radius that had the app could launch the app, and they would detect that you're there as well. And then basically both of you would be invited to collaborate in real time. And the way the app worked was each device would record locally. They'd all go to the cloud, and then everyone that participated would have access to everyone else's rushes to do a multi-camera edit. And at the time, I remember thinking it was bloody genius. If Mark Settle from BBC is in the audience, please, Mark, remind me, because I know we had a long discussion about this.
Sounds familiar. Is it like Collab, I think? Is that what it's
There
called?
was Collaboracam was one that kind of did it that way. I remember that. And there's another one that's done it recently. But this was a while back. It's just bugging me because I can still see the video. I just can't remember the brand. And it is definitely me showing my age. But anyway, so that's one possible thing. That's the shoot side collaboration. And then there's the edit side collaboration, obviously, which is if you have cloud storage, you could potentially have 2 or 3 people all. Well, I mean, I guess what you talked about, Joseph, was this idea of Frame.io and how you can have markup from a client, something similar, I guess, for video, right?
Sure, why not?
We just did a test yesterday because Jen and I were trying to figure out how to do a podcast and how can we do this just using our phones. But we use this app called Cinemaker, and it allows you to connect 4 different iOS devices. I think it might be Android as well. I'm not sure. We only did the iOS, but we had 2 iPads. One iPad was the director, and then we had 4 other devices. So we had 3 iPhones and an iPad, and we were able to capture all 4 of the streams. I was able to do live switching on my iPad. Like, it was kind of wild. And then it saved all of those files separately into a 1080. And then you can go back and do like another edit of it. So it has like multicam afterwards. But it's really, really fascinating how much you can do with that. So there's definitely a lot of things that you can do with that as well.
I will give a shout out to 2 other apps that do something very, very similar. I'm familiar with the one that you've used, actually. Over the last 5 years, I've done an event as well. And for a few of those years, we did an actual studio during the conference. And it was done with an app called Live to Air from Teradek, which does exactly the same thing. 4 phones and an iPad, and you must have a multi-camera studio. And then there's another brand as well who are actually based in Seattle with Filmic and Luma, I think, called Switcher Studio. And it does something similar. So, I mean, this is something I've been saying to radio journalists and TV journalists for about the last 5 years, which is, if you're putting all your teams out in the field recording, why don't you just get them together once a week and do a little kind of, you know, web TV show for YouTube? So, I mean, you know, there's huge creative potential, but I just think people don't realize how much you can do. Anyway, a couple more questions, because literally I'm watching that clock. What else we got? Tom Morris, with mobile workflow, what has been the farthest distance that you have all remote collaborated with on a project? Collaboration is obviously a big theme.
Remote
So I guess
collaborated.
Jen,
we are all over the world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, this whole project. Yeah.
You're so
I think
true.
this is it.
And I don't think people realize this. We know where each one of you guys is coming from, but just check this one out for the back end. So I'm coming to you from Ireland, in the middle of nowhere in Ireland. Elliot is in New Zealand, and he's vision mixing the show. The social media team are in Seattle, and they're driving the actual Q&A and everything else as well. So this is the real world. This is what digital collaboration really looks like. People are dotted all over the globe, and yet we can still come together, which was really the essence of the conference in the first place. So hopefully, Tom, that answered the question. And let's see if we have any more that we can grab before we run out of time. Robert, I'm not going to get that right. Shoji, Shoji. Any comments on the video capabilities of the new iPhone SE? Did I see a notification today from you, Justine, to say you just got your hands on, or was that another one that you just dropped today?
I mean, I did post just talking about some of the specs and stuff, but it's interesting because it's basically kind of the same camera as the iPhone XR. You can still shoot 4K 60. You can do, I mean, it's honestly going to be a great camera, I think, for the price and what you can do with it. It's using the same A13 Bionic chip as the iPhone 11. So the fact that you can get this entry-level iPhone for $399, it does only have one camera. It doesn't do night mode, but with moment lenses, like you can still get all of those same sort of like wide angle things. But I think if you're looking to get a phone or an iPhone at an inexpensive price, like this is the one to get.
Great advice. Very good. Any of the others of you had any look at the spec and any thoughts on it yet?
I looked at it a little bit, and I think like Justine was, I think there's probably a lot of. I watched a video on MKHD, and he was talking about. I think a lot of people, go to Android because of the price points, and to be able to have an iPhone with this type of processing power with this price point can sway them to maybe go iOS, and that can kind of change their whole situation, because once you get hooked on one iOS device and you see how much collaboration you can do between different devices, you kind of get hooked. So yeah.
Yeah, and even with
Very
like
true.
the monthly pricing, like it's almost like a steal. It really is a great deal.
Very good. Okay, great. We'll take maybe one or two more, and then we'll have to leave it. So Thomas Cohen, thanks to all the speakers, Filmic Pro and LumaFusion for the Small Creator Summit and great insights. Well, thank you, Thomas, for the feedback. I mean, it's been a phenomenal day. I have to say, like we've had a constant stream of between 450 people for the entire 2 sessions, with a peak of up to 800 people for spots, which is phenomenal for something that I won't tell you the number that the team had said. Like, if we could get X, we'd be happy. But it was a lot less than we got. Let's just say that. John on the Superfly said, this has been a great evening, and thanks everyone. I think he means, okay, great. Hi, John. Thank you. Where Donna knits. Sounds good, Donna. Thanks so much for doing this today. I hope you'll do it again. It's educational, inspiring, and motivating. Well, that's lovely to hear. Thank you so much. It's a reward for all the effort for the team behind the screen, who really don't get due credit, possibly. Thank you so much, everyone. Very informative from April Bloom. And maybe just one or two more. And I have one last question for you before I let everyone go home. In my case, go to bed, because it's midnight here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So there you go. That's how much I wanted to talk to you guys. Yeah, in a nutshell. I'm gonna ask you this one clanger of a question to wrap up. So I'm gonna give you a second to think about it while I do a little waffle. Secret to success in one word. You needn't fire just yet. Just think on it for a split second, and we're gonna go out on this. So while the panel are thinking about that word, because that's a toughie. I did this to my wife earlier, and I got a really funny look. But I want to thank everybody that has joined in for both sessions today. I hope you found it informative. Certainly by the comments that we've seen in the last couple of minutes, that has been the case. I particularly want to thank all 9 of our speakers, who have been phenomenal, and so giving of their time and sharing their insight and their knowledge. It really has been a privilege for me to basically be here and get to interview everybody. We are back. Not this time, but actually at 10 a.m. PDT next Friday. We have another 2 sessions lined up for you. Then we'll see how we do. I think the general consensus seems to be that everyone's been quite happy with how today went. I'm understating. So yeah, I think we'll definitely be back next week anyway, and we'll see where we go from then. But anyway, first, before I say goodbye, those single word pieces of advice. I'm going to start with Joseph.
Persistence.
You took mine.
Get a new one.
I'm going to conduct you all to say the word persistence.
I want to go next, and no one picks mine.
Yeah, me too.
Penny, what was your one?
Grit.
Grit. Oh, I like that one. Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, I'm going to leave it to the 3 ladies to decide who goes next.
I'm going to say balance.
Balance. Okay, yeah, good one. That, you mean work-life balance type balance? Yeah, okay, that's very important. Yeah, good. Justine?
Consistency?
Yeah. We could have gone down that rabbit hole, posting at the right time and letting the audience know you're coming. Yeah, absolutely. So much more to talk about. Cielo, parting word.
Courage.
Oh,
Courage.
Nice. That's a good one.
That is
good one.
good.
Okay, guys, you have been inspirational. There's one more comment in here from Melody Walker. She says, incredibly insightful, fantastic day. Many thanks to all of you. Amazing work. And I would absolutely 100% echo that as well. Again, to the panel, thank you so much for your time and your energy. I've really, really enjoyed the chat. The time has flown by. I can't believe how fast it went by. But it's been an absolute privilege and an honor. So thank you so much. And to you at home, wherever in the world you are, we've seen so many countries pop up in that timeline. It's ridiculous. But I'm delighted that you've been able to join us in spite of all the great time zone challenges that came with it. It certainly seems to have resonated with a lot of people. Both sessions will be available for catch up on both the Luma and the Filmic YouTube channels. And we have one huge big recording that we have to do a little bit of work on before we post it, but it will be there very soon. We'll be releasing all the speaker names for next week tomorrow on the website. I'll be working on that first thing in the morning. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing who comes back again next week. But for now, from everybody who's been part of the show and from all the speakers who've been absolutely phenomenal, thanks so much for joining us, and goodbye.